The taser fired before anyone could stop it. A 17-year-old black boy collapsed in the aisle of a first-class cabin screaming as passengers froze in horror. All he had done was reach into his pocket to show his boarding pass. Blood hit the floor. Silence followed. The flight attendant thought she had just neutralized a threat. The airline thought they could control the story. What none of them knew was this: the boy on the ground was the only son of a man who quietly owned the financial lifelines keeping their airline in the sky. And in that moment, as a child lost his eye, an entire airline lost its future. This is the story of how one act of prejudice didn't just cost a woman her job, it erased an entire airline from the sky. JFK International Airport Terminal 4 was a chaotic symphony of rolling luggage, crying infants, and the restless energy of 3,000 travelers trying to escape New York City. But inside the exclusive lounge of Apex Airways, the air smelled of white tea and old money. Sarah Jenkins adjusted her scarf, checking her reflection in the obsidian glass of the departure gate doors. She was 34, a senior purser, and she wore her uniform like armor. To Sarah, the cabin wasn't just a workplace. It was her kingdom, and she was the queen who decided who received the champagne and who got the warm soda. She was tired. It was her third leg of a transatlantic rotation, and her patience had eroded somewhere over the Atlantic 3 days ago. She wanted an easy flight. She wanted businessmen who slept and drank scotch. Boarding first class, the gate agent announced. Sarah stood at the aircraft door, pasting on the smile that didn't reach her eyes. She watched the passengers file in. Mr. Henderson in 2B, a regular, nodded. Mrs. Gable in 2A, the wife of a senator, ignored her. Standard procedure. Then he walked in. Marcus Sterling was 17 tall for his age, with the lanky build of a basketball player, or in his case, a cello prodigy. He wore a dark grey, oversized hoodie, loose sweatpants, and distinctively battered high-top sneakers. He had Beats headphones around his neck and a calmness about him that Sarah immediately misread as insolence. He didn't look like the passengers Sarah was used to serving in the front cabin. He looked to her prejudiced eye like someone who belonged in the back row near the toilets. Marcus held his phone, loosely scanning the aisle numbers. He stopped at 1A, the prime seat, the window seat with the extra legroom usually reserved for diplomats or CEOs. He began to settle in, tossing his backpack into the overhead bin with a casual ease. Sarah stiffened. She stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the galley floor. She didn't check her manifest. She didn't look at her tablet. She trusted her instincts, which were actually a cocktail of bias and exhaustion. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked the venom. "Sir, you need to keep moving. Economy is straight back past the curtain." Marcus paused halfway into the seat. He looked up, blinking. He had been thinking about the conservatory audition waiting for him in London. "Oh no. I'm good. This is me. 1A. Sarah let out a short, sharp breath through her nose. "I don't think you heard me. This is the first-class cabin. These seats cost $12,000. Now please grab your bag and move before you hold up the boarding process. You are blocking actual paying customers." Behind Marcus, a line of passengers was beginning to form. A heavy-set man in a suit sighed loudly, checking his Rolex. Marcus stood up, not to leave, but to clarify. "Mom, I have a ticket. My dad booked it. If you just check." "I don't need to check." Sarah snapped, her volume rising. "I know who sits in 1A, and it usually isn't teenagers in hoodies. You are trespassing in a premium cabin. This is a security violation. Trespassing." Marcus frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "I'm not trespassing. Look at my phone." He reached into his hoodie pocket to retrieve his iPhone, intending to pull up the QR code. To Sarah, whose adrenaline was spiking, the movement looked sudden aggressive. In the post-911 world, flight attendants were trained to be vigilant, but Sarah was trained to be paranoid. She saw a black hand reaching into a dark pocket, and her mind didn't see a ticket. It saw a weapon. Apex Airways had recently participated in a controversial pilot program equipping senior pursers with non-lethal conductive energy devices, tasers, for extreme cockpit defense. It was meant to be used only if the cockpit was breached. Sarah had the device clipped to her belt, concealed beneath her blazer. "Don't you dare!" she shrieked, stepping back. "Whoa, chill," Marcus said, pulling the phone out. The screen lit up. "It's just my boarding pass. He's reaching." Sarah yelled to no one in particular, panic overriding logic. She fumbled at her waist. "Lady, are you crazy?" Marcus took a step forward, confused by her hysteria, holding the phone out to show her the screen. Sarah drew the yellow device. She didn't issue a warning. She didn't wait for backup. She just wanted the threat to stop. She wanted him to submit. She pulled the trigger. The distance was less than 4 ft. The two barbed probes exploded from the cartridge. One hit Marcus in the shoulder. The other, due to the upward angle of Sarah's panicked aim and Marcus's flinch, struck him directly in the left eye. The sound was sickening. Zap crack. Marcus didn't just fall. He crumpled. The electricity locked his muscles, but the probe in his eye caused a pain so blinding, so absolute, that his brain short-circuited. He screamed a guttural, animalistic sound that froze every person on the jet bridge. He hit the floor, the phone skittering away, displaying the name Passenger Sterling Marcus, Seat 1A. Currents of 50,000 volts surged through his body for 5 seconds, but the damage to the eye was mechanical, not just electrical. The hook had pierced the cornea. Sarah stood there, the taser ticking, as the cycle ended. Smoke curled from the wires. She breathed heavily, waiting for the applause, waiting for the thank you from the passengers for taking down the intruder. Instead, there was a horrified silence. "Oh my God," the heavy-set man with the Rolex whispered. "You just shot her kid." Chaos erupted. "My eye, I can't see. I can't see." Marcus was curled in a fetal position, blood streaming down his cheek, mixing with the tears from his good eye. The probe was still embedded, a gruesome piece of wire trailing back to Sarah's hand. A woman in row 2 screamed. The heavy-set man pushed past Sarah, dropping to his knees beside Marcus. "Don't touch it, son! Don't touch it!" he yelled, grabbing Marcus's wrists to stop him from ripping the probe out and causing more damage. "We need a medic now." Sarah stood frozen. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. She looked at the phone on the floor. The screen was still on. Sterling Marcus. First class. He reached for something. Sarah stammered, looking around for validation. He was aggressive. "You all saw it. He came at me. He was showing you his damn ticket." A woman shouted from the aisle. "You psycho." The co-pilot, Captain Miller, burst from the cockpit. He took one look at the blood, the taser wires, and his senior purser, and his face went pale. Jenkins dropped the weapon. "Step away now." Within minutes, Port Authority police swarmed the jet bridge. Paramedics rushed past them carrying a trauma kit. They had to cut the wire, leaving the barb in Marcus's eye for the surgeons to remove. As they loaded the sobbing, thrashing teenager onto a stretcher, the entire first-class cabin watched in mute horror. Sarah was escorted off the plane, not in handcuffs yet, but into a private airport office. The airline's crisis management machinery began to turn. Clear's throat. Apex Airways was a mid-tier carrier trying to break into the luxury market. Their CEO, a man named Gregory Vance, was currently on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Clear's throat. The call went to the Vice President of Operations, a ruthless corporate climber named Linda Croft. "Tell me he had a weapon," Linda said into her phone, pacing her office in Chicago. "Tell me he had a knife, a box cutter, anything." "No weapon," the station manager at JFK whispered. "Just an iPhone 15. And Linda, the kid, he's hurt bad. The eye looks gone." Linda cursed. "Okay, spin it." Passenger failed to comply with federal safety instructions, acted erratically. Flight crew followed protocol to neutralize a perceived threat. Get the legal team to lock down the passenger manifest. I want NDAs ready for anyone who saw it. Who is the kid, Marcus Sterling? Sterling. Common name. Any relation to any one important system. Just says his ticket was purchased by a third-party corporate account, Vanguard Holdings. Linda paused. The name sounded familiar but vague, like a shell company. Fine, it's just some corporate brat. Offer to pay the medical bills, give the family a voucher, and keep the flight attendant quiet. Put her on paid leave. We protect the brand. Linda hung up, thinking she had handled a PR bump. She had no idea she had just signed the death warrant for her career. 5,000 mi away, in a glass-walled conference room in Tokyo, a meeting was taking place. Julian Sterling sat at the head of a mahogany table. He was a man who did not appear on Forbes lists because he paid a great deal of money to ensure he didn't. He was 50 years old, black with salt and pepper hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was the majority shareholder of Vanguard Holdings, a private equity firm that owned shipping lines, tech startups, and critical infrastructure across 3 continents. Julian was a man of immense patience and terrifying focus. He had raised Marcus alone after his wife died. Marcus was his heart. The business was just his wallet. His personal phone, a device that only 5 people in the world had the number for, buzzed on the table. It was the red phone setting. Emergency. The room of Japanese investors fell silent as Julian held up a hand. He answered, "Speak, Mr. Sterling." The voice of his personal security detail, Thomas, cracked. Thomas was usually made of stone. "It's Marcus. He's at Jamaica Hospital in Queens. There was an incident at JFK." Julian's face didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees Celsius. "Is he alive?" "Yes, but sir, a flight attendant shot him in the face with a taser. He was boarding his flight to London. They think he's lost the left eye." Julian stood up. The chair behind him didn't scrape. It was pushed back with a controlled, lethal force. "Prepare the jet." Julian said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried more weight than a scream. "And Thomas, find out who owns the airline. Not the CEO. The airline. It's Apex Airways, sir." Julian walked to the window, looking out at the Tokyo skyline. "Apex," he repeated, tasting the name like ash. "Freeze all our logistics contracts with their partners. Get the legal team, the war room team, not the corporate ones, to New York. I want every frame of CCTV footage from that terminal before I land." "Sir, what is the objective?" Thomas asked. Julian turned back to the room of bewildered investors. His eyes were cold, dead things. "Total annihilation," Julian said. "I don't just want to sue them, Thomas. I want to turn their planes into soda cans." He hung up and looked at his Japanese partners. "Gentlemen, the meeting is over. I have to go to New York to bury a company." The waiting room of the ophthalmology ward at Jamaica Hospital was a grim place painted in colours meant to be soothing, but that only smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Julian Sterling did not sit. He stood by the window, his reflection ghostly against the lights of Queens, wearing the same suit he had worn in Tokyo. He had flown 14 hours, fueled only by espresso, and a rage so cold it burned. The door opened. Dr. Silas Thorne, a specialist in ocular trauma, stepped out. He looked exhausted. He pulled off his surgical cap, running a hand through thinning hair. Julian turned. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Thorne," said, his voice grave. "We did everything we could. The surgery took 6 hours. The eye," Julian said, he needed the facts. He was a man who dealt in assets and liabilities. He needed to know the damage. The barb penetrated the globe and tore through the cornea and the lens, damaging the retina. Thorne explained, not sugarcoating it. "We've managed to save the structure of the eye itself so he won't need a prosthetic immediately. But the vision in his left eye is gone irreversibly. He has light perception, only just shadows." Julian closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Marcus's boy, the boy who read sheet music like other kids read comic books. Binocular vision was crucial for a musician, for reading the conductor, for the spatial awareness of the orchestra. "Is he in pain?" "He's sedated," Thorne said. "But physically, yes. Psychologically, Mr. Sterling, he's terrified. He keeps asking why the lady hurt him. He keeps asking if he did something wrong." That question, "Did I do something wrong?" snapped the final tether of restraint in Julian's soul. "Thank you, Doctor," Julian said. "Send the bill to my office. Do not let anyone else near him. No press, no police, and absolutely no representatives from the airline." Meanwhile, at Apex Airways headquarters in Chicago, Linda Croft sat at the head of a long oval table in the war room. She was drinking a kale smoothie, looking at the projection screen that displayed Marcus Sterling's passport photo. "Okay, give me the rundown," she barked. The head of legal, a man named Arthur Finch, a weasel in a three-piece suit, shuffled his papers. "It's tricky, Linda. The passenger is 17, a minor. That plays bad with the jury. But we have the flight attendant's report." Sarah Jenkins Linda said. "How is she?" "She's a mess," Finch admitted, crying, saying she panicked. "But we've coached her. We are sticking to the narrative. Rapid movement. Refusal to obey crew commands. Possible weapon suspected?" "Good." Linda nodded. "What about the kid? Who are the parents?" "Father is Julian Sterling," Finch said, looking at a dossier. "Looks like he runs a logistics firm called Vanguard. Private company. We can't see their financials, which usually means they're small-time. Probably upper middle class, maybe low-level rich. He'll bark, but he'll settle." Linda scoffed. "Logistics, so he drives trucks." "Fine. We offer the standard compassion package. Cover the medical bills, refund the ticket, and throw in $50,000 for pain and suffering in exchange for a full NDA. We need this buried before the shareholders' meeting next week. And if he refuses," Finch asked. Linda's eyes narrowed. "Then we leak the thug narrative. We find dirt on the kid. School suspensions, bad grades, anything. We paint him as a danger to the safety of the flight. The public always sides with safety. No one wants to die at 30,000 FT because a flight attendant hesitated." She took a sip of her smoothie. "Do it. Send a rep to the hospital. Pressure them while the dad is still in shock." The hospital room. Marcus was awake, his head wrapped in thick white bandages, a patch over the left side of his face. He looked small in the hospital bed. Julian sat in the plastic chair next to him, holding Marcus's hand. Marcus's hand was long-fingered, elegant, a chist's hand. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice groggy. "I'm here, son. I didn't reach for a gun." Marcus sobbed, the tears soaking into the bandages. "I just wanted to show her my phone. I swear." "I know," Julian said, smoothing the hair back from Marcus's forehead. "I know you did nothing wrong. You were perfect. She was the one who was broken." "Am I going to be able to play?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. "The audition. You will play," Julian promised, though he didn't know how yet. "We will fix this. But first, I have to take care of the people who did this." There was a knock on the door. Julian stood up, his demeanor shifting from father to predator. He opened the door to find a young man in a cheap suit holding a briefcase. He looked like an intern. "Mr. Sterling," the man asked nervously. "I'm from Apex Airways' risk management team. I'm here to express our deepest regrets and to discuss immediate assistance for your son." Julian stepped into the hallway and closed the door softly behind him. He towered over the intern. "You have 3 minutes," Julian said. The intern swallowed hard. "Sir, Apex Airways views this as a tragic misunderstanding. We want to make it right immediately. We are prepared to offer full coverage of all medical expenses plus a settlement of $75,000. He pulled a document from the briefcase. "We just need you to sign this waiver stating that the incident was an accident and agreeing to confidentiality." Julian looked at the paper. He didn't take it. $75,000. Julian repeated, his voice flat. "For my son's eye, it's a very generous standard-off, sir, and we will refund the ticket." Julian laughed. It was a dry, humorous sound. "You people have no idea, do you? You didn't even run a background check." "Sir, get out," Julian said softly. "And tell Linda Croft that she just insulted the man who owns the lease on her airplanes." The intern blinked. I don't understand." "You will," Julian said. "By tomorrow morning you will. The war didn't start with a lawsuit. Lawsuits take years." Julian didn't have years. He had wrath. Julian returned to his hotel suite, the presidential suite at the Mandarin Oriental, and turned it into a command center. He had his 3 best lieutenants flying in: Thomas Wise, security; Elena, forensic accounting; and Marcus's godfather, David, who happened to be one of the most vicious litigators in New York. "Status." Julian commanded, looking at the whiteboard Elena had set up. Elena, a woman who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar budget, pointed to a flowchart. Apex Airways is a house of cards, Julian. They operate on thin margins. They don't own their fleet. They lease 80% of their planes from Global Aeronautics. Julian nodded. And who owns the debt for Global Aeronautics? Elena smiled a shark-like grin. A consortium of banks, but the majority holder of the distressed asset tranche is Vanguard Holdings. Julian allowed himself a cold smile, so I effectively own the mortgage on their landlord's house. Correct. Elena said, technically, Apex is late on their maintenance payments to the lessor. It's usually overlooked as long as they pay the lease. But if the lessor were to enforce the strict terms of the contract, they could ground the fleet. Julian finished. Call the CEO of Global Aeronautics. Remind him of the leverage we hold on his Asian shipping interests. Tell him I want a safety audit on every Apex plane he leases to them immediately. The media spin. While Julian was moving pieces on the financial chessboard, Apex Airways went on the offensive. The next morning, the headline on a major tabloid website screamed, "Drama at $30,000 FT. Teenager overpowered after threatening crew." The article, leaked by Linda Croft's team, was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed Marcus had been belligerent, smelled of illegal substances, and made a sudden move toward his waistband. It featured a grainy photo of Marcus from his Instagram wearing a hoodie looking tough. A photo taken 3 years ago for a Halloween costume. The comment section was predictable. Good job, crew. Safety first. Kids these days have no respect. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Julian read the article on his iPad. He didn't throw it. He set it down gently. They are trying to destroy his reputation, David said, pacing the room. This is defamation, Julian. We can sue. No, Julian said. Suing gives them a platform. They want a trial. They want to argue. He said, she said. I'm not going to argue with them. He turned to Thomas. Get the CCTV footage. I know the airport police have it. I know Apex has tried to bury it, but the Port Authority manages the cameras in the terminal. I'm working on it, boss, Thomas said. But Apex filed an emergency injunction to seal the evidence, citing ongoing TSA investigation. A judge signed it this morning. Judge Halloway? Halloway. Julian mused, golfs with the mayor. Likes campaign contributions. We're stonewalled, Julian David admitted. Until we get that video, it's the flight attendant's word against a black teenager. And in the court of public opinion, then we change the court. Julian said the counter move. Julian picked up the phone and dialed a number in London. Julian, a British voice answered. It was Sir Richard, the head of the Royal Conservatory of Music. Richard, I need a favour. I need you to release the audition tape Marcus sent you last month. The Rachmaninoff piece. Of course. Is the boy all right? We heard rumours. He's fighting. Just release the tape. Title it The Boy. Apex Airways blinded the first domino. 2 hours later, the video went live on Julian's newly created YouTube channel, simply titled Justice for Marcus. It wasn't a video of the fight. It was a video of Marcus playing the cello. The screen was black at first, with white text. Marcus Sterling clears throat 17 aspiring chist. Then the video faded in. Marcus looking young and focused, sitting in his living room playing Rachmaninoff's Vocalizer. The music was haunting, beautiful, heartbreakingly pure. It showed a gentle, sensitive boy with the hands of an artist. Not a thug, not a threat, a prodigy. As the final note faded, the screen went black again. New text appeared. On Tuesday, an Apex Airways flight attendant shot him in the eye with a taser because he looked suspicious while holding his boarding pass. He will never see out of that eye again. Apex Airways claims he was a threat. Does this look like a threat to you? The video didn't go viral immediately, it simmered. But back in the Apex boardroom, the mood was shifting from arrogant to uneasy. Why is the stock dropping? Linda Croft asked, staring at the ticker. Apex was down 4% in an hour. It's not the video, Finch said, looking at his phone, his face pale. Linda, we have a problem at O'Hare and JFK. What problem? The fuel trucks, Finch said. They aren't fueling our planes. Linda grabbed the phone. What do you mean the fuel supplier Atlantic Energy just placed our account on credit hold? They are demanding immediate payment of all outstanding debts. 6 months of back pay before they pump another drop. That's $12 million. We don't have that cash on hand. We have a contract, Linda screamed. They can't just stop. They can if they suspect insolvency risk, Finch stammered. They triggered the clause. Linda felt a cold pit in her stomach. Why now? Finch looked at her. Because Vanguard Holdings just bought a 15% controlling stake in Atlantic Energy this morning, and they ordered a credit review. Linda slumped in her chair. She remembered the name the intern had mentioned. Vanguard Holdings. The dad, she whispered. The truck driver. Dad, he's not a truck driver. Linda? Finch said, his voice trembling. I just did a deep dive. Julian Sterling isn't in logistics. He's a corporate raider. He's the guy companies call when they want to gut a competitor. He's worth $4 billion. Linda stared at the screen. The stock ticked down another 2%. He's not suing us. Linda realized terror finally setting in. He's besieging us. Just then, her secretary burst in. Ms. Croft, the FAA is on line 1 and the lesser Global Aeronautics. They just served us a notice of default. They want their planes back. Linda looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. The sun was shining, but for Apex Airways, the long night was just beginning. The morning of the third day, the war shifted from the financial markets to the living rooms of America. Linda Croft, sensing the walls closing in, decided to play her ace card. She booked a primetime interview on the Morning Report, a national news show watched by millions. Her strategy was simple. Villainize the victim to save the brand. She wore a soft pastel suit aimed at making her look maternal and reasonable, a sharp contrast to the aggressive narrative she was spinning about Marcus. In the Mandarin Oriental suite, Julian Sterling watched the large O-Lady screen. He was dressed in a dark turtleneck sipping green tea. His team, David, Elena, and Thomas, sat around him like generals in a bunker. She's going to lie, David said, watching the makeup artist powder Linda's nose on the screen. She's going to say Marcus assaulted her employee. Let her, Julian said, his voice dangerously calm. The higher she climbs, the harder the fall. Thomas, is the asset ready? Thomas nodded, checking his encrypted tablet. Asset is in position. The upload is CU'd. We're just waiting for the signal on the TV. The interview began. The host, a serious woman named Monica, leaned in. Miss Croft, Monica began. The internet is flooded with support for Marcus Sterling, a cello prodigy. People are calling for a boycott of Apex Airways. How do you respond to the allegations that your flight attendant used excessive force? Linda Croft put on her rehearsed face of concern. Monica, it is a tragedy whenever a passenger is injured, but we must remember that our flight crews are the first line of defense in the sky. The reports I have from multiple witnesses state that the young man was verbally abusive, refused to show his ticket, and made a sudden violent motion toward his waistband. In a post-911 world, Sarah Jenkins had a split second to make a life or death decision. She is a hero who protected the cockpit. Julian picked up his phone. He typed one word to Thomas. Now Thomas tapped a key on his laptop. The whistleblower 12 mi away, in a cramped apartment in Queens, a young man named Eric sat in front of a glowing server rack. Eric was a generic IT contractor for the Port Authority, one of the invisible people who maintained the servers that store the CCTV data for JFK. Normally, accessing these files left a digital fingerprint that would get him fired and arrested. But 20 minutes ago, the firewall protecting the specific node for Terminal 4 Gate B22 had mysteriously malfunctioned for 10 seconds. A malfunction arranged by a Vanguard Holdings subsidiary that provided cybersecurity for the airport. Eric didn't know Julian Sterling. He just knew that an encrypted email had arrived in his inbox offering him a job in Tokyo with a salary 5 times his current pay, provided he did one thing: drag and drop. Eric dragged the file named Cam B and 22 Incident Raw MP4 into the upload window of the Morning Report's live Twitter feed and simultaneously emailed it to every major news outlet in the country. The turn back on the TV screen, Linda Croft was gaining confidence. We cannot let emotion rule facts. Marcus Sterling was a threat. Period. Suddenly, the host Monica touched her earpiece. Her expression shifted from polite interest to confusion and then to shock. She looked off camera to her producer. "I'm sorry," Monica said, cutting Linda off. "Miss Croft, I'm hearing we have breaking news regarding this story. A video has just been released." Linda froze. "A video? That's impossible. The footage is under seal." "Apparently not anymore," Monica said. "We're going to play it now." The screen split. On the left was Linda's pale face. On the right, the grainy but high-definition footage from the jet bridge camera appeared. The world watched in silence. They saw Marcus Sterling, hoodie up but posture relaxed, walking down the jet bridge. They saw him stop at the door. They saw Sarah Jenkins block him. They saw the conversation. There was no audio, but the body language was clear. Marcus wasn't aggressive. He was confused. He stepped back. Then, the moment of truth. Marcus reached into his pocket slowly. He pulled out a phone. The screen lit up. He held it out clearly, displaying it to her. He wasn't lunging. He wasn't shouting. He was showing a ticket. And then they saw Sarah Jenkins draw the yellow taser and fire. The recoil was visible. Marcus dropped like a stone. But the video didn't stop there. It showed the aftermath. It showed Sarah standing over the convulsing boy, not helping him, but checking her nails, fixing her hair. It showed the utter lack of remorse. The feed cut back to the studio. The silence was deafening. "Miss Croft," Monica said, her voice icy. "You just told the American people he lunged. You said he was a threat. We just watched a woman electrocute a child holding an iPhone. Would you like to revise your statement?" Linda Croft opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish on a dock. The hero narrative evaporated in 10 seconds of footage. I haven't seen that angle," Linda stammered, sweat breaking out on her upper lip. "Context is key." "The context," Monica snapped. "Is that you just lied to the world?" In the hotel suite, Julian Sterling didn't smile. He just took a sip of his tea. "Phase 2, he said to David. "Execute the shorts." David nodded. He signaled the brokers. Vanguard Holdings had spent the last 24 hours buying put options on Apex Airways stock, betting that the price would crash. As Linda Croft stammered on live TV, the stock market reacted. Apex Airways shares plummeted from 42 AULAO to 18 more in 12 minutes. Hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap vanished. Now Julian said, standing up, "Get the car. We're going to the hospital. I want to be there when the police arrived for Miss Jenkins." While Linda Croft was being crucified on live television, the real hard karma was coming for Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was currently at her apartment in Long Island, hidden away by the airline. She had been drinking wine since 10 a.m., telling herself she was the victim. "I was doing my job," she muttered. "They don't know the pressure." Her phone began to buzz. Then it rang. Then it vibrated again. A flood of notifications. She picked it up. Her Instagram, her Facebook, her LinkedIn all exploding. "Child abuser racist. I hope you rot." We saw the video. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The video. She turned on the TV just in time to see herself on every channel. The frame of her firing the taser was frozen on the screen. Then the phone rang with a call from an unknown number. She answered, expecting the airline's legal team. "This is the NYPD Detective Miller," a hard voice said. "Miss Jenkins, we have a warrant for your arrest for assault in the first-degree reckless endangerment and criminal possession of a weapon. We are outside your building. Come out with your hands empty." Sarah dropped the phone. She ran to the window. 3 squad cars were parked outside, lights flashing. The investigation. While Sarah was being processed at the precinct, her mug shot instantly becoming the face of hate across the internet. Julian's team was digging deeper. They didn't just want the foot soldier, they wanted the commanders. Elena, the forensic accountant, walked into the hotel suite with a folder. She looked disgusted. "Julian, you need to hear this," Elena said. "We got into the Apex internal HR server. The red file. The red file. It's where they keep the complaints they pay to make go away," Elena explained. Sarah Jenkins isn't a first-time offender, she laid out the papers. Incident 1, 2022. Sarah Jenkins poured hot coffee on a hijab-wearing passenger who asked for water. Settlement, $5,000. NDA signed Incident 2, 10/23. Sarah Jenkins called airport security on a Hispanic family speaking Spanish in row 4, claiming they were plotting. The family was removed. It was a birthday trip, settlement, travel vouchers. Incident 3, 6 months ago. Sarah Jenkins requested to be transferred off a flight because the pilot was a black woman. Request granted by management to keep the peace. They knew, Julian said, his voice dropping to a subsonic growl. They knew she was a racist ticking time bomb, and they gave her a taser. "It gets worse," Elena said. "Look at the email chain authorizing the taser program." Julian read the email from Linda Croft to the head of security. Subject: retaser deployment. "I don't care about the training costs. Just give the purses the weapons. If they zap a few unruly passengers, maybe the rest will learn to sit down and shut up. It's cheaper than hiring air marshals." "Cheaper?" Julian repeated. He handed the file to David. "Send this to the district attorney and send a copy to the FAA. I want the airline's operating certificate suspended by midnight." The hammer falls. The exposure of the red file turned a PR disaster into a corporate death sentence. By 4 Mass PM, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, issued an emergency order effective immediately. All flight operations of Apex Airways are grounded pending a comprehensive review of crew training safety protocols and civil rights compliance. At airports across the country, Apex planes were ordered back to the gates. Passengers were offloaded. Pilots were told to cut engines. In Chicago, Linda Croft watched from her office window as the tarmac below became a graveyard of silent Apex planes. Her phone was ringing. The board of directors they were calling to fire her, but it was too late. The company was already dead. The insurance kill shot. Julian wasn't done. He had one final knife to twist. He called his contact at Lloyd's of London, the massive insurance market that underwrote Apex's liability policy. Sir Edward, Julian said. "Have you seen the news I have, Julian? It's ghastly. I am currently holding the debt on the aircraft Apex leases," Julian said calmly. "I am formally notifying you that as the creditor, I consider the airline to be in breach of contract due to gross negligence and willful misconduct. If you continue to insure them, Vanguard Holdings will sue your syndicate for aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise." There was a pause. The insurance industry ran on risk. Apex was now radioactive. "I understand, Julian." Sir Edward said, "We will issue a notice of cancellation. Coverage ceases at midnight. Without insurance, it is illegal for an airline to operate. Even if the FAA lifted the ban, Apex couldn't fly." Julian hung up. He walked to the window of his suite. He had destroyed an airline in 3 days. He had cost investors billions. He had ruined careers. But then his phone rang. It wasn't business, it was the hospital. "Mr. Sterling," it was Dr. Thorne. "Marcus is awake. The anesthesia has worn off. He wants to see you. He's asking for his cello." Julian's face softened. The mask of the corporate warlord falling away to reveal the terrified father beneath. "I'm coming." 3 weeks later. The landscape of the aviation industry had been permanently altered. Apex Airways was no longer flying. Its planes sat like white whales in graveyards across the Mojave Desert, seized by creditors. But the final act of vengeance wasn't about machinery. It was about people. The location was a federal conference room in Lower Manhattan. This was the settlement hearing a formality to determine how much of the carcass of Apex Airways would be fed to Marcus Sterling. Linda Croft sat on one side of the table. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes darted nervously. Next to her was Arthur Finch, the weasel lawyer, looking equally defeated. On the other side sat Julian Sterling. He didn't bring a team this time. He just brought Marcus. Marcus wore a suit that fit his lanky frame perfectly. Over his left eye was a custom-made black leather patch. He looked scarred, yes, but he also looked dangerous in a quiet, dignified way. He held his cello case like a shield. Mr. Sterling, the mediator, began the bankruptcy court, has authorized a liquidation fund. Apex Airways is prepared to offer the maximum insurance cap $10 million. This is to cover medical bills, pain and suffering, and loss of future earnings. Linda Croft spoke up, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. It's a historic amount, Julian. We are bankrupt. This is every penny left in the coffers. Take it and let us close the file. Julian didn't look at the mediator. He looked at Linda. You think this is about money? Julian asked softly. My company loses $10 million in shipping delays when it rains in Singapore. I don't want your money, Linda. I want your confession. Excuse me? Linda bristled. I want you to admit on record that you authorized the aggressive defense policy that put a military-grade weapon in the hands of an unstable flight attendant. I want you to admit you prioritized profit over passenger safety. I can't do that, Linda snapped. That would open me up to criminal liability. You are already open to it. Julian slid a manila folder across the table. This morning, the district attorney received a package from my private investigators. It contains your deleted emails, Linda, the ones where you referred to passengers as cattle and revenue units, and specifically the email where you mocked the background check requirements for crew members. Linda's face turned the color of ash. The FBI is waiting in the lobby, Julian said, checking his watch. They aren't here for the settlement. They are here for you. Fraud, negligence, conspiracy to conceal evidence. Linda stood up her chair, screeching. You can't do this. I followed orders. The board sold you out yesterday to save their own skins, Julian said coldly. You are the scapegoat, Linda. Enjoy prison. I hear the food is worse than what you served in economy. As if on cue. The doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped in. Linda Croft, the woman who thought she was untouchable, was handcuffed in front of the boy she had tried to smear. She didn't scream. She just wept. A broken, hollow sound. The fate of Sarah Jenkins. While Linda faced white-collar justice, Sarah Jenkins faced the grim reality of Rikers Island. Her bail hearing had been a media circus. The judge, Judge Halloway, who had quickly realized which way the wind was blowing and turned on his former friends, denied bail, citing her as a flight risk and a danger to the community. Sarah sat in a holding cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with her pale, terrified skin. She had lost her apartment. She had lost her pension. Her name was now a synonym for racism and brutality. She was offered a plea deal. 15 years in state prison for assault in the first degree. She took it. She had no money for a lawyer, and Apex Airways had cut her loose the moment the handcuffs clicked. The woman who treated the cabin like her kingdom would now spend the next decade in a 68 concrete box where she would be the one told when to sit, when to stand, and when she was allowed to eat. The final check with Linda arrested, and Sarah's sentencing pending. The mediator looked at Julian nervously. Mr. Sterling, regarding the settlement, give it to the United Negro College Fund, Julian said, standing up and placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Every dime create a scholarship in Marcus's name for musicians who have suffered physical trauma. We don't want their blood money. He turned to his son. Ready to go, Marcus. Marcus adjusted his eye patch. He looked at the empty chair where Linda Croft had sat. Yeah, Dad. Marcus said, I'm ready to play. 6 months later, London. The Royal Conservatory of Music is a hallowed place. The air inside the Grand Concert Hall is thick with history dust and the ghosts of geniuses. The auditorium was packed not just with judges, but with the public. Since the story had gone global, everyone wanted to see the boy who lived the chist with the eye patch. Backstage, Marcus paced. The loss of his left eye had destroyed his depth perception. In the beginning, he had missed the strings. He had knocked over his music stand. He had thrown his bow across the room in frustration, screaming that he was broken. But Julian had been there. Julian had hired specialists to help him retrain his brain. He had sat with him for hours, listening to the screeching mistakes, encouraging him to find a new center of gravity. You don't need two eyes to see the music. Marcus Julian had told him, you feel it now. The stage manager nodded. Mr. Sterling, you're up. Marcus walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, tentative. They saw the patch. They saw the scar that ran down his cheek. They felt pity. Marcus hated pity. He sat down, adjusting the end pin of his cello. He took a deep breath. The darkness on his left side was a void, a permanent reminder of the hate that existed in the world. But on his right, the light shone. He placed the bow on the strings. He wasn't playing Rachmaninoff today. He was playing Elgar's cello concerto in E minor, a piece full of sorrow, anguish, and ultimately power. The first chord ripped through the silence. A heavy, dark resonant sound that seemed to shake the floorboards. Julian sat in the front row, his hands clasped tight. He watched his son. He didn't see a victim. He saw a warrior. Marcus closed his good eye. He didn't need to see the fingerboard. He knew where the notes lived. He poured everything into the music. The pain of the taser, the fear of the darkness, the anger at the injustice, and the love for his father, who had burned the world down to save him. The music soared. It wept. It screamed. The audience was spellbound. They weren't watching a disability. They were witnessing a transformation. The eye patch wasn't a disfigurement anymore. It was a badge of honor. It was the mark of someone who had walked through fire and come out carrying a song. As Marcus hit the final frantic crescendo, his bow flying, his body rocking with the rhythm, he felt a sense of release. The ghost of Sarah Jenkins, the ghost of the plane, the ghost of the fear. It all evaporated into the rafters. He held the final note, drawing it out until it faded into a silence so profound it felt like prayer. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then the hall erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. People stood up. The judges stood up. Flowers rained down onto the stage. Marcus opened his eye. He saw the standing ovation, but he only looked for one person. He found Julian in the front row. The man who terrified corporate boards and destroyed airlines was openly weeping, clapping his hands until they hurt, beaming with a pride that outshone every spotlight in the room. Clear his throat. Marcus smiled, a real, genuine smile. He bowed. Apex Airways was dust. Linda Croft was in a cell. Sarah Jenkins was a memory. But Marcus Sterling was just getting started. And that is the story of how one act of prejudice brought down an empire. Sarah Jenkins thought she was silencing a thug in a hoodie. Instead, she awoke a sleeping giant and created a musical legend. It's a brutal reminder. Power isn't about the uniform you wear or the weapon you hold. Real power is the love of a father who will move mountains for his son, and the resilience of a boy who turned his tragedy into triumph. Apex Airways thought they could bury the truth, but they forgot the most important rule of karma. When you dig a grave for someone else, make sure you dig one for yourself too. What do you think? Did Sarah deserve 15 years? Or was she just a product of a broken system? And would you have settled for the $10 million? Or did Julian do the right thing by donating it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next